Good morning, guys. This is Jack with Jack Harrison Survival, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about trap making. Food in a survival situation is a bit of a controversial subject. It takes calories to get calories. In my opinion, it's a much greater risk than it is a reward, calorically, as well as physically. You could poison yourself, a number of different things could happen. You could just burn a lot of calories and time that should be spent on other priorities, chasing rabbits around in the woods. That being said, I do believe learning passive hunting techniques can benefit you and ultimately will allow you to continue putting time and energy into those biological needs such as shelter and water and creating fire, while at the same time hunting. The most perfect example would be deadfall traps. Now, any type of trap would fall into the passive hunting category, and on the other end would be active hunting, which would include techniques such as, using projectile weapons like throwing sticks and atlatls and bows and slings, or just running around with a spear, basically actively pursuing game. Whereas passive is setting something like a figure 4 deadfall and checking it. So while that trap is set, it's hunting for you. It's important to keep in mind that traps, you don't just set one and then leave. They work in numbers. That being said, you could get lucky, and I'm sure many of you have stories of only setting maybe 2 or 3 traps and getting a rat or a mouse in that trap. In this video, we're really only going to be covering the figure 4 as a mechanism and as a trap. We're not going to be diving very deeply into location, trap tricks like for setting in different sets in different environments. That's not what we're going to be doing in today's video. We're just going to be constructing a simple figure 4 deadfall and talking a little bit about effective ways of setting that deadfall. And then we'll come back in another series and discuss trap setting, mentality, and the whole bag of So in this environment, the figure 4 is an excellent trap along with its cousin, the Paiute figure 4, a variation off of what we'll be doing today, and that's for a whole nother video. But the figure 4 is one of my favorite traps in this environment because we've got a species of rats, the pack rats, dusky-footed wood rat, many different species, and they basically build these huge brush piles out in the woods. And the reason that the figure 4 works so well for these particular animals is that they've got designated entrances, and so you can block off or set traps at those entrances, and they are very curious creatures and they're highly likely to trip your trap. Now, just because you've set a trap doesn't mean that an animal will walk in there and it'll work. There are many little nuances that go into setting a trap effectively. We'll get into a little bit of that today, but ultimately that's for a whole nother video. So as far as the figure 4 goes, it's a really simple trap. It's basically a lever system, and you only need 3 sticks and a deadfall. Now, a deadfall trap is basically any trap that has a heavy weight of some kind, whether that be a rock or a stump, that collapses on the animal, basically creating a rat pancake, or just smashing it, basically killing it by, trauma, essentially flattening the animal. Now, snares, along with other spring pull traps, many snares are just designed to hold the animal in place. You've got leg traps, which are also designed to hold the animal in place. You've got spring pull traps, which are designed to impale the animal. You've got spring pull snares that are designed to basically break the animal's neck or at least hang it off of the ground. And the advantage to that in comparison to all the other trap systems would be that your food is now in a relatively safe spot off the ground and unavailable to other predators. Couple things you have to keep in mind with traps. One, they have to be set in numbers, right? In order for those traps to really be working for you, there has to be more than one of them. Now, that's not to say you can't just go set one trap, but if you want to be efficient about this, set 10 to 32. You have to know the animal you're going for. If you're going to set a trap for a fox, you have to know the behavior of a fox. Not only that, but you have to set that trap in a place where that animal is going to be traveling through. It's a common misconception that you just set a trap, bait it, and something's just going to come cruising by and go, ooh, I want to climb under that awkward looking rock in the middle of a field and pull the peanut butter out of there. No, that's not how it works. You want to go to the animal's home, and you want to set the trap in a way that it is disguised and not entirely unnatural or foreign, so that that animal feels comfortable entering your trap. Lastly, you have to make sure that you're manufacturing your trap out of solid material and utilizing materials that are going to be conducive for a solid set. Now, what I mean by that is you can't be using rotten sticks. Your trap needs to be appropriately sized for the animal and the deadfall you are using. So you're not gonna make a 1.5 foot tall figure 4 trap and use a 1.5 foot tall deadfall. In general, you need a deadfall that's 3 times the length of your upright on your trapping stick. At least that's my opinion. You have to make sure that you're baiting that trap with something the animal wants, right? You can't just put something that's all over the ground. Say there's acorns all over the ground. You're not just gonna set it with an acorn. Now what you can do, say you have a fire, maybe roast that acorn over the fire. If you have a little salt, you know, from your skin or something, rub the salt on the acorn. Many animals, you know, work really hard to get salt out in nature, so anything salty is going to work very, very well. Do something to make your bait different than what is around the animals. You know, an example that I commonly hear is like, if all the blackberries are picked off the bottom of the bush, you know, go ahead and use a blackberry and pick it off the top of the bush, right? It's that idea that you want to get something that they don't have access to. First thing we're going to be doing today is we're going to select some materials. As far as what we're looking for, it really depends on the size of the deadfall you're going to be using. The deadfall we're going to be using weighs about 35 pounds. That means the trap has to be strong enough to hold the weight of the deadfall. So when we're looking at our materials, we want to make sure we're selecting strong branches, so that can be green or dead, but just make sure it's not easy to break. 2, we want to be selecting something of the proper diameter. So for a small deadfall, you're not going to want to select, you know, a small log. In general, for the size traps that I like to set, I'm usually utilizing sticks in the highlighter thickness range. So anywhere from 1/2 inch on up to a full inch. You'll see here that we've selected a nice piece of bay. In this particular case, this bay is living, and we're going to strip all the branches off of this and cut it into sections. 2 of the 3 sticks that make up the figure 4 deadfall are about the same size. The 3rd stick being the bait stick, which will be twice the length of the other 2 sticks. The 3 sticks are composed of the upright, the diagonal, and the bait stick, all of which have precisely carved notches on them so that the trap will stay in place when there is weight put on top of the diagonal. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to cut my stick up into sections. Like I said before, you can start with just cutting out the upright and the diagonal, and then you can look for the bait stick later. The bait stick generally is going to be narrower and longer, so that's something that you can look for after you've carved your first 2 pieces. Or you can go ahead and cut it out of the same branch, just like we have done here. First thing I'm going to do, now that I have my sticks all separated and cut into the sizes that I want, is I'm going to be carving a dovetail notch. A dovetail notch is much like that of an American standard screwdriver head, also known as a flathead screwdriver, but it's a notch that makes a V. Once we've carved our dovetail, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our diagonal. Now this is where things can start to get tricky. First thing we're going to do with our diagonal is about 2 inches from the end, on the thicker end of the stick, if there is one end that's thicker than the other, we're going to carve a number 7 notch. The number 7 notch is going to sit into the upright just like this. Once we carve our number 7 notch, and by the way, it's called a number 7 notch because it looks like a number 7, as you can see here, we're going to carve another dovetail that lines up with the number 7 notch. So you see here the number 7 notch is lined up with the dovetail notch versus opposite of each other. At this point, we can carve our bait stick. First thing we're going to do with our bait stick is we're going to go ahead and we're going to carve a notch at the very end of the bait stick. Now, in this situation, you can leave an inch hanging off. It doesn't need to be all the way at the end. So you're going to go ahead and carve another number 7 notch. Once you've carved that, you can see that the notch fits in really nicely with the rest of the parts. You'll notice that as I push down on the diagonal, it wants to kick the bait stick forward. Now what we need to do is we need to create a notch that is going to lock that bait stick in place. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure out where the bait stick meets the upright. The steeper that diagonal is, the slower the deadfall is going to trigger. Now we're going to basically put our trap together and see where the bait stick meets the upright. You'll notice the bait stick meets the upright right about here. So now that we've chosen that spot, we're going to go ahead and mark it with our knife. Once we've marked it, we're going to carve another number 7 notch in that is going the opposite direction of the number 7 notch on the front end. This will also be rotated about 90 degrees from the notch on the very end. As I turn the stick, you'll notice that we have our original number 7 notch at the very end of the bait stick, and then another one at our point that we've picked out. And they're facing in opposite directions and on different sides of the stick. Now that we have all of our notches carved, we can set our trap. So the first thing we'll do is we'll make sure everything fits together by using our hand as the deadfall. The number 7 notch on our diagonal, we fit on top of our upright. We have our little paddle on the end of our diagonal or our dovetail notch, and we hook that into the end of our bait stick. So now the trap wants to kick forward. So then what we go ahead and do is we try and hook our bait stick into our upright. Now, depending on the depth of your number 7 notch and the diameter of your upright, you may need to carve a square edge on that upright. See if it's hooking in, and if it's not, do a little carving to flatten and create a square edge or 90-degree angle for that to fit in place. So now we've got our 90-degree angle, everything's in place, and if you put a little bit of pressure on the diagonal, you'll notice it holds everything together. That is how the trap is going to work. So now we're going to go select a deadfall. When looking for a good deadfall, ideally you're looking for a rock. You need 2 things, an anvil stone and a deadfall. So you're going to look for a rock that's flat and is going to be easily balanced on one point. So we've gone ahead and we've selected this rock here. It's okay if the anvil isn't 100% flat on both sides. We just need to make sure that it's flat on one side. That way the deadfall can collapse upon it and the animal's not going to just get smushed into the ground and be able to squirm out injured. So we've got our deadfall and we've got our anvil. Now we're ready to try and set our trap. This is the trickiest part for most people, so make sure you practice. Another tip would be don't go for the heaviest deadfall in the woods. Start with something light and get good at setting it first. That way you don't smash your hand. Now, if you're having problems with the deadfall going from side to side or collapsing, then you can go ahead and you can sharpen some sticks and pound them in next to the deadfall itself. What that's going to do is it's going to keep it stable. That way the wind doesn't trip your trap and an animal does. Thank you guys for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Practice building as many of those traps as you can possibly build, and with the more practice you get, the better and more efficient you'll get at making them and setting them. And don't get frustrated. It's all about trial and error. If your trap isn't working, it's probably because you didn't make it right. So watch the video again, watch how I carved the trap, and try it again, and go slow and be methodical. Make sure you're using straight branches. Try to do everything you can to reduce the variables so that you succeed rather than fail over and over and over again. Disclaimer, primitive trapping is not legal in many states. Make sure you know the laws and regulations in your area before you go setting any primitive traps. In a survival situation, when your life is on the line, anything goes. Do what you need to do to get it done. But make sure you've practiced at least setting and making your traps first. If you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Check me out on Instagram at Jack Harrison Survival, and I'll catch you in the woods.